We've built provenance into our synthesis so that when sources disagree, we surface the conflict instead of papering over it with averages or fabricated citations. Now we turn to the 6 exam scenarios. Each one presents a different binding constraint, something that rules out a naive approach, and your job is to identify that constraint, pick the proportionate fix, and name what it costs. Let's start with the first scenario. By the end of this module, you can work any of the 6 exam scenarios, extract its binding constraint, say what that rules out, choose the proportionate fix, and name what it cost. Here is how this module builds up. Scenario analysis is a decision discipline, not a description exercise. It means extracting the one binding constraint that rules options out, then choosing the smallest intervention that addresses the root cause, the proportionate fix, and naming what you gave up. It is not about summarizing the scenario or picking the most comprehensive change. The distinction people get wrong is treating it as a comprehension task rather than a decision under constraints. Without this discipline, you reach for a prompt instruction where money moves. In production, that means a refund above policy threshold gets issued because the model missed a nuance or a jailbreak bypassed the instruction. The cost is real money lost, customer trust eroded, and an audit finding you cannot explain away. Fixing the symptom with a prompt feels fast, but the root cause, no programmatic guard, remains, and the failure repeats. Take the symptom where refunds above policy threshold get issued. The binding constraint is that money movement must be programmatically enforced. That immediately rules out adding a prompt instruction. It is the attractive wrong answer because it seems simple, but it loses because a prompt cannot guarantee enforcement. The proportionate fix is an interception hook in process refund that blocks calls exceeding the limit. It costs you the flexibility to handle edge cases without a code change. The other symptoms, skipping get customer, thin descriptions, escalation mistakes, follow the same pattern: extract the constraint, forbid what violates it, pick the smallest root cause fix, and name the cost. The rest are on the page. The durable rule is, where money or identity moves, enforce programmatically, never rely on prompt wording, because a rule that usually holds is not a rule that always does, and refunds are irreversible. For tool confusion, fix the descriptions first, it is the cheapest high-leverage change. For escalation, the only valid triggers are a policy gap, an explicit customer request, or no progress after investigation, never sentiment or confidence scores, because those are proxies that misclassify edge cases. In the exam, the distractor that catches people is the prompt instruction where money moves. It looks like a quick, low-effort fix, but it violates the binding constraint of programmatic enforcement. The exam tests whether you can spot that a rule that usually holds is not good enough for irreversible actions. Always write the binding constraint before reading the options. It stops you from being seduced by sensible-sounding answers that are fundamentally unsafe. This technique is a decision framework for the architect exam scenarios. It's not a checklist you recite, it's a reasoning pattern that forces you to find the root cause before acting. The distinction people get wrong is thinking the scenario is the question. It's not. The symptom is the question, and the framework keeps you from solving the wrong problem. Without this, you'll fix symptoms instead of causes. In production, that means a rule that works for you but not the team leads to inconsistent behavior, broken builds, and wasted hours debugging. The cost is trust in the tool and velocity. This framework prevents that by making the binding constraint explicit, so you choose the fix that actually solves the sharing problem, not just your local issue. Take the symptom: a rule works for you and not for the new joiner. The binding constraint is that the rule must be available to everyone who clones the repo. That rules out user-scoped configuration, because it wouldn't be shared. The proportionate fix is to move the rule to project scope and commit it. The cost is losing personal overrides without affecting the team. The most attractive wrong answer is using /memory to add it to your user scope. It's fast, but it doesn't solve the sharing problem. The rest of the symptoms follow the same pattern, they're on the page. The durable rule: answer where does this configuration live, by who needs it, and whether it must load always or on demand, not by convenience. For shared rules, prefer project scope and commit them, don't rely on inference. When interpretation is ambiguous, examples beat longer prose every time. The author rejects convenience-based placement because it ignores the sharing and loading requirements that settle almost every item. On the exam, the scenario is never the question, the symptom is. Always extract the binding constraint before reading the options, otherwise, attractive distractors will bias you. The most common trap is answering where configuration lives by convenience rather than by who needs it. This part is testcraft. They'll offer a quick user scope fix that seems right but violates the sharing constraint. Coordinator decomposition is the act of splitting a research topic into scopes and assigning each to a specialized subagent. It is not about how capable the subagents are. A subagent that searches the web perfectly will still miss 2/3 of the topic if the coordinator told it to search only 1/3. The distinction people get wrong is thinking that a bad output means a bad subagent. In a multi-agent system, the coordinator's design determines the ceiling of what is possible. This prevents incomplete reports. Without proper coordinator decomposition, subagents work on narrow, overlapping, or irrelevant scopes. The synthesis agent then produces a report that looks competent but is factually incomplete. In production, that means rework, missed deadlines, and eroded trust. A user who receives a report covering only 1/3 of the topic will not blame the coordinator, they will blame the system. And they will be right. Take the symptom, every subagent succeeds, but the report covers only 1/3 of the topic. The binding constraint is coordinator decomposition. The coordinator split the topic poorly, so subagents worked on too narrow a scope. This rules out blaming the synthesis agent or adding more subagents, those address symptoms, not the root cause. The proportionate fix is to revise the coordinator's topic decomposition so each subagent receives a complete, non-overlapping scope. The cost is increased coordinator complexity. You give up a simpler, static decomposition. The alternative is to improve the synthesis agent, but it loses because the missing information was never gathered in the first place. The rest of the symptoms are on the page. The durable rule is this: when every subagent did its job and the output is still wrong, look up at the coordinator. Subagents inherit nothing. If a piece of context is not in the prompt, it does not exist for that agent. Errors travel with context or they travel useless. Structured error context is mandatory. And provenance is carried structurally or it is fabricated later. When the document rejects an option like improving the synthesis agent, it is not because the synthesis agent is unimportant, it is because that fix bypasses the root cause, which is the coordinator's decomposition. This is testcraft. The exam will show a bad report and list synthesis fixes first. The trap is blaming the agent nearest the bad output. The distractor is a larger intervention that addresses a symptom. It sounds thorough but violates the proportionate fix principle. When you see a symptom like report covers 1/3 of the topic, your first move is to write the binding constraint, coordinator decomposition. That one sentence will rule out half the options before you even read them. This is a decision framework for architectural choices under pressure. It is not a checklist you recite, it is a way to cut through plausible-sounding options by identifying the one thing that makes some of them impossible. The distinction people get wrong is thinking it is about describing the scenario. It is not. It is about deciding under the scenario's constraints. Without this, you get context bankruptcy. The agent reads every file to answer a question a search would have answered, exhausts its window, and either fails or, worse, gives a confident wrong answer based on stale context. In production, that means debugging sessions that end in confusion, refactors that miss critical callers, and a system that is reliable only until the context fills up. This technique prevents that by forcing you to spend context only on files you know matter. Take the symptom, find all callers of X answered by reading every file. The binding constraint is that context is finite, you must not spend it on files until you know they matter. That forbids reading every file, and it also forbids using a subagent to read them in parallel, because that still spends context on irrelevant files. The proportionate fix is to grep first, search for X across the codebase, then read only the files that contain it. That addresses the root cause, you did not know which files mattered, with the smallest intervention. The cost is that grep can miss dynamically constructed references, so you trade some completeness for context efficiency. The other symptoms in the document follow the same pattern: widen an anchor before editing, enumerate exports before searching, fork a session to compare strategies, use a subagent for phase 1 discovery, checkpoint with a state manifest, and improve MCP tool descriptions so the agent prefers them. The rest are on the page. The durable rule is, search before you read. Never spend context on files until you know they matter. When discovery is verbose, offload it to a subagent, not because it is faster, but because it isolates the context spent and reports back a summary. After a teammate's refactor, start a fresh session with a summary. Stale context is more dangerous than no context because it is confident. And when the agent prefers a built-in tool over a better MCP tool, improve the MCP tool's description. The agent chooses based on what it understands the tool to do, not on what the tool actually does. On the exam, the trap is reading files to answer a question a search would have answered. The scenario punishes context spent before you know which files matter. The distractor that catches people is an option that sounds efficient, like using a subagent to read all files in parallel, but still violates the binding constraint. This part is testcraft. The exam wants you to see that efficiency does not matter if the approach is fundamentally wrong. CI prompt engineering for Claude isn't about writing clever instructions, it's about defining categorical criteria. Vague language like be thorough or only report high confidence gives the model no measurable boundary. Instead, you supply explicit rules, flag any function with cyclomatic complexity above 10 or ignore files matching star.test.ts. The distinction people get wrong is thinking better phrasing fixes noise, when only concrete, testable criteria do. In production, a CI bot that cries wolf stops being useful. If 70% of performance findings are wrong, developers don't just ignore that category, they ignore the whole report. The cost is real, bugs slip through because the signal is buried in noise. Vague quality language can't fix this because it doesn't change what the model flags, it only changes the words around the flag. The failure is a credibility collapse that takes months to rebuild. Take the symptom performance findings are 70% wrong. The binding constraint is trust, a noisy category costs credibility on accurate ones. The document's fix is to disable that category, rebuild its criteria with categorical rules, then re-enable it. The alternative, tweaking the prompt to say only report high confidence, loses because it doesn't change what the model flags, it just changes the words. The rest of the symptoms follow the same pattern: extract the constraint, rule out what violates it, pick the smallest root cause fix. The durable rule is, every CI prompt must contain categorical criteria, explicit, measurable rules that define what to flag. If a category becomes noisy, disable it, don't try to fix it with vague language, because that doesn't address the root cause. And never batch a blocking pre-merge check, that's for work nobody is waiting on, not for feedback a developer needs before merging. These rules hold whether you're using Claude code today or any future model in a pipeline. On the exam, you'll get a symptom like performance findings are 70% wrong. The distractor is always an option that sounds precise but is actually vague, like only report high confidence findings. It catches people because it feels like an instruction, but it constrains nothing. Your job is to see past that, extract the binding constraint, and pick the proportionate fix. This is testcraft. The exam rewards decision-making under constraints, not scenario description. Structured extraction pulls JSON objects from unstructured documents using a schema. But the schema only enforces syntax, it guarantees the output is valid JSON, not that the values are correct. The distinction people get wrong is thinking a strict schema makes the output trustworthy. It does not. The hard case is absence. When a required field has no source data, the model will invent a value rather than fail. That is the boundary. Schema stops malformed JSON, not hallucinated content. Without this discipline, you get silent data corruption. Downstream systems trust the JSON and act on wrong numbers, invoices that do not add up, categories that do not exist, confidence scores that are pure invention. Required fields are the biggest risk. When the source document is silent, the model will fabricate a value to satisfy the schema. And retry loops make it worse, they burn tokens and time on documents that will never succeed because the information is simply absent. The cost is not just accuracy, it is trust in the entire pipeline. Work the case where line items do not sum to the stated total. The binding constraint is that the source document lacks the information needed to make the numbers add up. That immediately rules out retries in stricter schemas. Retry cannot create missing data, and a schema cannot check arithmetic. The proportionate fix is to add a calculated total field and validate semantically, rejecting documents where the math fails. The alternative of adding a retry loop loses because it addresses form, not absence. The rest of the symptoms, JSON syntax errors, invented values, enum spills, are on the page, each with its own constraint and fix. The durable rule: a schema is a syntax contract, not a truth guarantee. Always make fields nullable when the source may be silent. That prevents hallucination by letting the model output null instead of inventing a value. Validate semantically, check that sums add up, categories stay inside enums, and cross-field relationships hold. And never trust an aggregate accuracy number, segment by document type and field to find where the system actually fails. These practices hold whether you are building for an exam or a production pipeline next year. This part is testcraft. The exam will offer retry loops as a fix for nearly every symptom. They are the most common distractor. Remember, retry helps with form, never with absence. The trap is believing a strict schema makes the output correct. The exam tests whether you know it only eliminates malformed JSON. Always find the binding constraint first, the one thing that rules options out, before you read any answer choices. That discipline alone will carry you through the extraction scenario. In these 6 scenarios, you saw how binding constraints shape every fix. When money moves, gate on confirmation. Place configuration where the consumer needs it. If subagents all succeed but output is wrong, the coordinator is the fault. Search before reading to save context. And remember, a strict schema stops bad format, not bad math.